The scream that escaped Rebecca Martinez's throat on that Tuesday evening in March could have shattered glass. She was folding laundry in her living room, half watching the evening news, when she saw something that made her heart stop completely. There, in the background of a live television broadcast from Chicago, was a girl who looked exactly like her daughter Emma. The same blonde hair, the same delicate features, the same way of tilting her head when she was curious. But Emma had been dead for 5 years. "Oh my God!" Rebecca shrieked, dropping the basket of clothes and lunging toward the television screen. Her hands pressed against the glass as if she could somehow reach through and touch the girl who stood behind the cheerful morning show host. The reporter was doing a segment about a local charity event, completely unaware that in the background, a 12-year-old girl was staring directly into the camera with eyes that Rebecca would recognize anywhere. Those were Emma's eyes, her baby's eyes. Rebecca's neighbor, Mrs. Patterson, came running from next door after hearing the scream. She found Rebecca on her knees in front of the television, sobbing uncontrollably and pointing at the screen. "Rebecca, what's wrong? What happened?" Mrs. Patterson asked, her voice filled with concern. "It's her! It's Emma!" Rebecca cried, her voice breaking. "She's alive! My baby is alive!" Mrs. Patterson looked at the screen, then back at Rebecca with deep sadness in her eyes. This wasn't the first time Rebecca had thought she'd seen Emma. In the 5 years since her daughter's disappearance, there had been dozens of false sightings, each one breaking Rebecca's heart a little more. "Honey," Mrs. Patterson said gently, "you know the police found her body. We went to the funeral together, remember?" But Rebecca wasn't listening. She was frantically rewinding the DVR, playing the segment over and over again. Each time she watched, she became more certain. The way the girl moved, the way she looked around nervously, even the small scar above her left eyebrow that Emma had gotten when she fell off her bike at age 4. "No!" Rebecca shouted. "This is different. Look at her." "Really look at her." Mrs. Patterson studied the screen more carefully this time. The girl did bear a striking resemblance to Emma, but after 5 years, wouldn't Emma look different? Older? Changed? Rebecca grabbed her phone with shaking hands and called the police station. Detective James Morrison had been the lead investigator on Emma's case, and despite the official closure, he had always maintained a soft spot for Rebecca. "Detective Morrison? It's Rebecca Martinez. I need you to come over right now. I found Emma. She's alive." There was a long pause on the other end of the line. "Rebecca, we've talked about this before. Emma's case was closed. We found her remains in the woods behind Miller's farm." "Those weren't her remains," Rebecca screamed into the phone. "I'm telling you, she's alive. She's on television right now. Please, just come look." Detective Morrison sighed deeply. He had seen Rebecca spiral like this before, but something in her voice tonight was different, more urgent, more certain. "I'll be there in 20 minutes, he said quietly. As Rebecca waited for the detective, she continued to replay the footage. The charity event was taking place at the Chicago Children's Hospital, and the girl appeared to be with a middle-aged man who kept his hand firmly on her shoulder. The man's face was partially obscured by a baseball cap, but there was something unsettling about the way he held on to the girl. The girl, Emma. Rebecca was certain it was Emma, looked thin and pale. Her clothes were clean but ill-fitting, and she had a haunted look in her eyes that no 12-year-old should ever have. But she was alive. She was breathing. She was there. When Detective Morrison arrived, Rebecca practically dragged him to the television. She played the segment 3 times before he said anything. "Rebecca," he began carefully, "I understand why you want this to be Emma, but we have to be realistic here. The dental records matched. The DNA was conclusive." "What if they were wrong?" Rebecca demanded. "What if someone made a mistake? What if those remains belonged to someone else?" Detective Morrison had been a cop for 23 years, and he had learned to trust his instincts. Looking at the footage now, he had to admit there was something compelling about Rebecca's certainty. The girl did look remarkably like Emma, and the man with her seemed nervous, constantly looking around as if he was afraid of being recognized. "Tell me about this broadcast," Morrison said. "When was it filmed?" "It's live. It's happening right now." Rebecca exclaimed. "The charity event is at Chicago Children's Hospital. We could drive there, we could find her." Morrison looked at his watch. It was 8:30 p.m. and Chicago was a 4-hour drive from their small Pennsylvania town. Even if they left immediately, the event would be long over by the time they arrived. "Rebecca, I need you to calm down and think clearly," Morrison said. "If this really is Emma, we need to handle this properly. We can't just show up and cause a scene. We need to contact the Chicago police, get them involved, and do this the right way." But Rebecca was already grabbing her car keys. "I'm going to Chicago, with or without you." Morrison knew that look in her eyes. He had seen it 5 years ago when Emma first disappeared, and he knew there was no talking Rebecca out of this. If there was even a 1% chance that Emma was alive, Rebecca would move heaven and earth to find her. "All right," Morrison said, pulling out his phone. "Let me make some calls, but we do this my way, understood?" Rebecca nodded frantically, tears streaming down her face. For the first time in 5 years, she felt something she had almost forgotten how to feel: hope. As Morrison made calls to his contacts in the Chicago Police Department, Rebecca stared at the frozen image on her television screen. The girl's eyes seemed to be looking directly at her, pleading for help. "I'm coming, baby," Rebecca whispered to the screen. "Mommy's coming." 5 years earlier, October 15th had started as the most ordinary day in Rebecca Martinez's life. She was making pancakes for 7-year-old Emma when her phone buzzed with a work message that seemed completely insignificant at the time. "Mom, can I walk to school today? Please?" Emma had asked, her bright blue eyes sparkling with excitement. Her blonde pigtails bounced as she practically vibrated in her chair, syrup-covered fork in hand. Rebecca smiled, wiping flour from her apron. At 29, she had learned to treasure these simple moments with her daughter. As a single mother working as a nurse at Millbrook General Hospital, every minute with Emma was precious. "Not today, sweetheart. You know the rules," Rebecca replied, flipping another pancake. The kitchen smelled of vanilla and butter, a comforting aroma that would later become unbearable in her memories. "I'll drive you after breakfast." Emma pouted but didn't argue. She was a good kid, the kind of child who still believed in fairy tales and thought her mother could fix anything. The kind of child who trusted the world completely. The drive to Millbrook Elementary took exactly 7 minutes. Rebecca had timed it countless times. Always the same route down Maple Street, past the old church with its weathered steeple, then left onto School Road. Emma chattered about her upcoming science project on butterflies, her small hands gesturing excitedly. "Mrs. Henderson says we might get to see real caterpillars turn into butterflies," Emma exclaimed as they pulled into the school parking lot. "Can you believe that, Mom? They completely change into something beautiful." Rebecca's heart clenched with love and pride. "That's amazing, baby. Make sure you pay attention to everything she teaches you." She watched Emma skip toward the red brick building, her pink backpack bouncing with each step. Other children streamed through the main entrance, their voices creating a cheerful symphony of childhood innocence. Rebecca waited until Emma disappeared through the doors before driving away. That was the last time she would see her daughter for 5 years. The call came at 3:47 p.m. Rebecca was checking on patients in the pediatric ward when her phone rang. The caller ID showed Millbrook Elementary, and Rebecca's stomach immediately dropped. Schools didn't call unless something was wrong. "Mrs. Martinez, this is Principal Williams. I need you to come to the school immediately." "What's wrong? Is Emma hurt?" Rebecca's voice was tight with panic. Emma didn't board her bus this afternoon. We can't find her anywhere on school grounds." The phone slipped from Rebecca's hand and clattered to the hospital floor. Her legs gave out and she had to grab the nurse's station counter to keep from falling. The other nurses rushed to her side, but their voices sounded like they were coming from underwater. Rebecca drove to the school in a haze of terror, her hands shaking so badly she could barely grip the steering wheel. When she arrived, police cars were already in the parking lot, their red and blue lights casting eerie shadows across the playground where Emma had played just that morning. Detective Morrison met her at the main entrance. He was a tall, serious man with kind eyes who spoke in the gentle tone reserved for delivering devastating news. "Mrs. Martinez, I'm Detective Morrison. We're going to find Emma, but I need you to help us understand what happened." "I don't understand anything," Rebecca cried. "She was supposed to get on bus number 12 at 3:30. She always gets on bus number 12. Principal Williams approached them, his face pale and drawn. "Mrs. Martinez, we've reviewed the security footage. Emma left the building at 3:28 p.m., but instead of going to the bus line, she walked toward the parking lot." "That doesn't make sense," Rebecca said, shaking her head frantically. "Emma would never do that. She knows the rules. She would never leave with a stranger." "The footage shows her walking with someone," Detective Morrison said carefully. "A man in a dark jacket. They appear to be talking, and Emma doesn't seem distressed." Rebecca felt the world spinning around her. "Show me. I need to see the footage." They led her to the principal's office, where a laptop displayed the grainy, black and white security footage. Rebecca watched in horror as her daughter walked calmly across the parking lot with a man whose face was obscured by shadows and a baseball cap. "Who is that?" Rebecca screamed at the screen. "Who is that man?" "We're working on enhancing the image," Detective Morrison said. "Mrs. Martinez, I need you to think carefully. Has Emma mentioned anyone new in her life? A teacher? A coach? A family friend?" Rebecca's mind raced through every conversation she'd had with Emma in recent weeks. There had been nothing unusual, no mention of new people, no changes in behavior. "There's no one," Rebecca whispered. "Emma tells me everything. She would have told me if someone was talking to her." But even as she said it, Rebecca realized how naive that sounded. How many parents had said the exact same thing? How many children had secrets they kept from their parents? The search began immediately. Within hours, the entire town of Millbrook was mobilized. Volunteers combed through every street, every park, every abandoned building. Search dogs were brought in from the state police. The FBI was contacted. Rebecca didn't sleep for 3 days. She walked the streets calling Emma's name until her voice was hoarse, posted flyers on every telephone pole and storefront window, and begged the local news stations to broadcast Emma's picture. On the 4th day, they found Emma's pink backpack in a drainage ditch 2 miles from the school. It was empty except for her science notebook, which was water-damaged but still readable. On the last page, Emma had written, in her careful 7-year-old handwriting, "The man says he knows where the butterflies live." Rebecca collapsed when Detective Morrison showed her the notebook. The words felt like a knife through her heart. Emma had trusted this man. She had gone with him willingly because he had promised to show her something beautiful. The investigation continued for months. The FBI brought in behavioral analysts, the state police expanded the search to neighboring counties, and the media attention brought in hundreds of tips from across the country. But every lead turned into a dead end. Then, 8 months after Emma's disappearance, hunters found human remains in the woods behind Miller's farm, 15 miles outside of town. The bones were small, child-sized, and they were found with fragments of clothing that matched what Emma had been wearing the day she disappeared. The dental records were a match. The DNA was conclusive. Emma Martinez was officially declared dead. Rebecca's world ended that day. She quit her job at the hospital, stopped eating, stopped sleeping, stopped living in any meaningful way. The only thing that kept her going was the nagging feeling that something wasn't right about those remains. The bones had been scattered. By animals, the forensic expert explained. That's why they seemed so small, so incomplete. That's why Rebecca couldn't shake the feeling that they didn't belong to her daughter. But everyone else accepted the evidence. The case was closed. Emma was buried in Millbrook Cemetery under a small white headstone that read, "Emma Martinez, beloved daughter, forever 7." For 5 years, Rebecca visited that grave every week, bringing fresh flowers and talking to the headstone as if Emma could hear her. She told her about her day, about the changing seasons, about how much she missed her laugh. But deep down, in a place she was afraid to acknowledge, Rebecca had never truly believed that Emma was in that grave. And now, staring at the television screen in her living room, she knew she had been right all along. The drive to Chicago felt like the longest 4 hours of Rebecca's life. Detective Morrison had managed to contact the Chicago Police Department, and they had agreed to meet Rebecca and Morrison at the hospital where the charity event had taken place. Detective Lisa Chen of the Chicago PD was waiting for them in the hospital parking lot when they arrived at 1:30 a.m. She was a small, efficient woman with sharp eyes and a no-nonsense attitude. "I've reviewed the footage you sent, Detective," Chen said without preamble. "I have to say the resemblance is striking. But we need to be careful here. If this really is your daughter, we're dealing with a kidnapping case that's been active for 5 years." Rebecca's hands were shaking as she showed Detective Chen the enhanced screenshots she had taken from the television broadcast. "It's her. I know it's her. A mother knows her own child." "The event ended hours ago," Detective Chen continued. "But I've spoken with the hospital's security team. They're pulling all the surveillance footage from today. If this girl was here, we'll find her." They spent the next 3 hours in the hospital's security office reviewing footage from dozens of cameras. Rebecca's heart pounded every time she saw a blonde child, but most of the images were too blurry or distant to make a positive identification. Then, at 4:17 a.m., they found her. Camera 7, positioned near the main entrance, had captured a clear image of the girl walking hand in hand with a middle-aged man. The timestamp showed 2:15 p.m., exactly when the live broadcast had been taking place. "That's her!" Rebecca screamed, pointing at the monitor. "That's my Emma!" Detective Morrison leaned closer to the screen. The girl was definitely the same one from the television broadcast, and the resemblance to Emma was undeniable. But what caught his attention was the man beside her. "Can you enhance this image?" Morrison asked the security technician. As the image became clearer, Rebecca gasped. The man looked familiar, but she couldn't place where she had seen him before. He was in his 50s, with graying hair and a nervous demeanor. He kept looking over his shoulder as if he was afraid of being followed. "I need you to run this through facial recognition," Detective Chen told her team. "And I want every camera, in a 6-block radius, checked. Find out where they went after they left the hospital." While the Chicago police worked on tracking the man and the girl, Rebecca sat in the hospital cafeteria, staring at a cup of coffee that had long since gone cold. Detective Morrison sat across from her, his phone constantly buzzing with updates from his contacts. "Rebecca," Morrison said gently, "I need you to prepare yourself for the possibility that this might not be Emma. Even if it is her, she's been gone for 5 years. She might not remember you. She might not want to come home." Rebecca's eyes flashed with anger. "She's my daughter. Of course she'll want to come home." "I'm just saying that we need to be realistic about what we might find," Morrison continued. "If someone has had her for 5 years, there's no telling what kind of psychological damage has been done." Before Rebecca could respond, Detective Chen approached their table with a grim expression on her face. "We got a hit on facial recognition," she said, sitting down across from them. "The man's name is David Kellerman. He's 53 years old, unemployed, and he has a record." Rebecca's blood ran cold. "What kind of record?" "Child endangerment, attempted kidnapping, and possession of child pornography. He served 3 years in prison and was released on parole 18 months ago." The room seemed to spin around Rebecca. This monster had been walking around free while her daughter was missing. "Where is he? Where does he live?" "That's the problem," Detective Chen said. "His last known address was a halfway house on the south side, but he stopped reporting to his parole officer 6 months ago. He's been in the wind." Detective Morrison's phone rang, and he answered it immediately. Rebecca watched his face change as he listened to whoever was on the other end. "That was the tech team," Morrison said after hanging up. "They tracked Kellerman and the girl to a parking garage 3 blocks from the hospital. Security footage shows them getting into a white van with Illinois plates." "Did they get the license number?" Detective Chen asked. "Partial. They're running it now." Rebecca stood up abruptly, her chair scraping against the floor. "We're wasting time sitting here. He could be taking her anywhere. He could be hurting her right now." "Rebecca, sit down," Detective Chen said firmly. I know this is difficult, but we have to do this the right way. We've issued an Amber Alert for the van. Every police officer in the state is looking for them. But Rebecca wasn't listening. She was thinking about the look in the girl's eyes during the television broadcast. The fear, the sadness, the desperate hope. If that really was Emma, she had been living with this monster for 5 years, and Rebecca had been visiting an empty grave while her daughter was suffering. I should have known, Rebecca whispered, tears streaming down her face. I should have kept looking. I should have never given up. Detective Morrison reached across the table and took her hand. You couldn't have known. The evidence was conclusive. Anyone would have believed it. But what if I was the only one who could have saved her? What if she's been waiting for me all this time and I stopped looking? Before anyone could answer, Detective Chen's radio crackled to life. All units, we have a possible sighting of the white van. Northbound on I-94, approaching the Wisconsin border. Rebecca's heart leaped. They're running. He knows we're looking. For him. Detective Chen was already on her feet, coordinating with the state police. Within minutes, they were in an unmarked police car, racing north toward the Wisconsin border with sirens blaring. As they drove through the early morning darkness, Rebecca pressed her face against the window, searching every vehicle they passed for a glimpse of white. Somewhere out there, her daughter was in the hands of a predator, and Rebecca would not rest until Emma was safe in her arms again. Hold on, baby, Rebecca whispered into the darkness. Mommy's coming. Mommy's finally coming. The white van was spotted at 6:23 a.m. at a truck stop just outside Madison, Wisconsin. Rebecca's heart hammered against her ribs as Detective Chen coordinated with local law enforcement over the radio. After 5 years of believing her daughter was dead, the possibility of seeing Emma alive felt both miraculous and terrifying. All units, suspect vehicle is parked at pump number 4 at the Flying J truck stop, mile marker 142. The dispatcher's voice crackled through the radio. Suspect is inside the convenience store with a young female matching the description. Rebecca grabbed Detective Morrison's arm so tightly her knuckles turned white. That's them. That has to be them. Wisconsin State Police are setting up a perimeter, Detective Chen said, her voice tense with concentration. They're treating this as a hostage situation until we know more. The drive to the truck stop took 47 minutes that felt like 47 hours. Rebecca stared out the window at the passing farmland, her mind racing with questions that had no answers. If this really was Emma, what had the last 5 years been like for her? Did she remember her mother? Did she even know her real name anymore? When they arrived at the truck stop, the scene was controlled chaos. Police cars surrounded the building, their red and blue lights painting the early morning sky in urgent colors. SWAT officers were positioned behind vehicles, their weapons trained on the convenience store entrance. Detective Chen parked behind the command vehicle and immediately began conferring with the Wisconsin State Police commander. Rebecca tried to follow, but Detective Morrison gently held her back. You need to stay here, Morrison said. If this goes wrong, if there's shooting, Emma could be hurt. I need to see her, Rebecca pleaded. I need to know if it's really her. Morrison handed her a pair of binoculars. You can see from here, but you cannot leave this vehicle. Understood? Rebecca focused the binoculars on the convenience store windows. Through the glass, she could see a man pacing near the snack aisle, occasionally glancing toward the windows. Beside him stood a girl with blonde hair, wearing a faded blue dress that was too small for her. Even from this distance, even after 5 years, Rebecca knew immediately that she was looking at her daughter. It's her, Rebecca screamed, tears pouring down her face. Oh God, it's really her. Emma looked older, thinner, and there was something in her posture that spoke of years of fear and submission. But her face, her beautiful face, was exactly as Rebecca remembered it, just aged from 7 to 12. Detective Chen returned to the vehicle with an update. The store manager says Kellerman bought food and gas, but he's been inside for 20 minutes just walking around. He seems agitated, like he knows we're here. What's the plan? Morrison asked. We're going to try to talk him out. The negotiator is setting up now. Rebecca watched through the binoculars as a police officer with a megaphone approached the store. David Kellerman, this is the Wisconsin State Police. We need you to come outside with your hands visible. Through the store windows, Rebecca could see Kellerman's reaction. He grabbed Emma's arm roughly and pulled her toward the back of the store, away from the windows. He's hurting her, Rebecca shouted, reaching for the car door handle. Morrison grabbed her wrist. Rebecca, no, you'll make this worse. The negotiator tried again. David, we know you're scared, but we just want to talk. No one needs to get hurt here. For several minutes, nothing happened. Then, slowly, Kellerman appeared, at the front window with Emma beside him. He was holding something in his right hand that the officers couldn't identify from their position. I need a clear shot, one of the SWAT officers radioed. Negative, the commander responded. Too much risk to the child. Rebecca could see Emma's face clearly now through the binoculars. Her daughter looked terrified but alert, her eyes darting between Kellerman and the police cars outside. There was something in Emma's expression that reminded Rebecca of the determined little girl who used to insist on walking to school by herself. David, the negotiator called out, we know about Emma Martinez. Her mother is here. She just wants her daughter back. At the mention of her name, Emma's head snapped toward the windows. She pressed her face against the glass, scanning the police cars as if she was looking for someone specific. Rebecca couldn't contain herself any longer. She threw open the car door and ran toward the store, ignoring Morrison's shouts behind her. Emma! Rebecca screamed at the top of her lungs. Emma, it's Mommy! Through the store window, Emma's eyes went wide with shock and recognition. Her mouth formed the word Mommy, though no sound could be heard through the glass. Rebecca, get back! Detective Chen shouted, but Rebecca was already at the store entrance. Inside, Kellerman was shouting something at Emma, but the girl wasn't listening. She was staring at her mother with tears streaming down her face, her small hands pressed against the window. I'm here, baby, Rebecca cried. Mommy's here! Suddenly, Emma did something that surprised everyone. She bit down hard on Kellerman's hand that was gripping her arm. He yelped in pain and loosened his hold just enough for Emma to break free. The 12-year-old girl ran toward the store entrance with a speed born of 5 years of pent-up desperation. Kellerman lunged after her, but Emma was already pushing through the glass doors. Mommy! Emma screamed as she ran into Rebecca's arms. The reunion was everything Rebecca had dreamed of for 5 years, and nothing like she had imagined. Emma felt so small, so fragile, but she was real and warm and alive. Rebecca held her daughter so tightly she was afraid she might break her. I knew you'd come. Emma whispered into Rebecca's neck. I knew you'd find me. Behind them, SWAT officers stormed into the convenience store and apprehended Kellerman without further incident. He didn't resist. He just stood there with a defeated expression, as if he had always known this day would come. But Rebecca barely noticed. She was too busy memorizing the feeling of her daughter in her arms, the sound of her voice, the miracle of her breathing. Emma was alive. Emma was home. I'm sorry I took so long, Rebecca whispered, stroking Emma's hair. I'm so sorry, baby. It's okay, Mommy, Emma said, pulling back to look at her mother's face. He told me you were dead. He told me you didn't want me anymore, but I never believed him. Not really. Rebecca's heart shattered and mended itself in the same moment. I never stopped looking for you, not for one single day. As paramedics approached to check Emma's condition, Rebecca realized that this was just the beginning. They had found each other, but the real work of healing was just starting. The hospital room in Madison was painted a cheerful yellow with cartoon animals dancing across the walls. Emma sat on the examination table, her legs dangling over the edge, while Dr. Sarah Williams conducted a thorough medical evaluation. Rebecca hadn't left her daughter's side for even a moment since the EI reunion at the truck stop. Physically, she appears to be in good health, Dr. Williams told Rebecca quietly, while Emma was distracted by a nurse taking her blood pressure. She's underweight and shows signs of vitamin deficiency, but nothing that can't be corrected with proper nutrition. Rebecca nodded, though her attention was focused entirely on Emma. Her daughter looked so much older than 12, with an alertness in her eyes that spoke of years spent in survival mode. What about other injuries? Rebecca asked, dreading the answer. Dr. Williams glanced at Emma, then back at Rebecca. We'll need to do a more comprehensive examination, but there are no obvious signs of physical abuse. However, I want to have our child psychologist speak with her. Detective Chen entered the room with a gentle knock. Emma, I'm Detective Chen. I know this is overwhelming, but I need to ask you some questions about David Kellerman. Is that okay? Emma looked to her mother for reassurance before nodding. He said his name was Uncle David. He said you sent him to pick me up from school because you were in an accident. Rebecca's hands clenched into fists. Baby, I would never send a stranger to get you. Never. I know that now, Emma said softly. But I was 7, and he knew things about you. He knew you worked at the hospital. He knew I liked butterflies. He said you told him about my science project. Detective Chen leaned forward. Emma, this is very important. How did he know those things about you and your mother? Emma was quiet for a long moment, her brow furrowed in concentration. He said he was watching us. He said he had been watching, for a long time, learning about our family. The words sent a chill down Rebecca's spine. This monster had been stalking them, studying their lives, waiting for the perfect moment to strike. Where did he take you after he picked you up from school? Detective Chen asked gently. To a house in the woods. It was far away from everything. There were no neighbors, no other houses, just trees everywhere. Emma's voice became smaller as she remembered. He said it was our new home. He said you didn't want me anymore because I was bad. Rebecca pulled Emma closer. You were never bad, sweetheart. You were perfect. You are perfect. He made me call him Uncle David, and he said I had to forget my old name. He said my name was Sarah now, and that I was his niece. Emma looked up at her mother with eyes that held too much knowledge for a 12-year-old. But I never forgot. I never forgot I was Emma Martinez, and I never forgot you were my mommy. Detective Chen continued her questioning carefully. Did Uncle David ever hurt you, Emma? Emma shook her head. Not really. He never hit me or anything, but he was always watching me. Always. I couldn't go outside by myself. I couldn't talk to other people. He said if I ever told anyone who I really was, something terrible would happen to you. What about school? Did you go to school? He taught me at home. He had books and computers. He was actually pretty smart. Emma paused, seeming to realize how strange that sounded. I know that's weird to say, but he wasn't mean all the time. Sometimes he was almost nice. But I was always scared. Rebecca struggled to understand how her daughter had survived 5 years with this man. What did you do all day, baby? I read a lot. He had lots of books about science and nature, and I wrote in a diary, but I had to hide it because he didn't like me writing about the past. Emma's eyes brightened slightly. I wrote letters to you, Mommy. Hundreds of letters. I hid them under a loose floorboard in my room. We'll make sure to get those letters, Detective Chen promised. Emma, can you tell me about yesterday? How did you end up at the hospital in Chicago? Uncle David said we were going on a trip. He seemed really nervous, more nervous than usual. He kept checking the news on his phone and looking out the windows. Emma frowned, trying to remember details. We drove for a long time and then we went to this big building with lots of sick people. Did he say why you were going there? He said we were going to help with some kind of charity thing. He made me wear this dress and told me to smile and be friendly. But he kept holding my hand really tight and he kept looking around like he was scared of something. Rebecca realized that Kellerman must have been getting desperate. Maybe his money was running out or maybe he was afraid of being caught. Taking Emma to such a public place had been a huge risk. Emma, Detective Chen said, when you were at the hospital, did you know you were on television? Emma's eyes widened. We were on TV? Yes, and that's how your mother found you. She was watching the news and saw you in the background. Emma turned to Rebecca with amazement. You saw me on TV? I never stopped looking for you. Rebecca said, tears in her eyes. Even when everyone else said you were gone, I kept looking. Dr. Williams returned with the results of Emma's blood work. Everything looks good, she announced. Emma, you're going to need to eat lots of healthy food and take some vitamins, but you're going to be just fine. As the medical team finished their examinations, Detective Morrison arrived with news about Kellerman. He's talking, Morrison told Detective Chen quietly. He's confessing to everything: kidnapping, falsifying documents, fraud. He's been living off disability payments and moving around every few months to avoid detection. What about the remains we found 5 years ago? Rebecca asked. Whose bones were those? Morrison's expression was grim. Kellerman says he found the body of a homeless child who had died of exposure. He planted Emma's clothing with the remains to throw off the investigation. Rebecca felt sick. This man had desecrated a child's grave just to cover his tracks. How long has he been planning this? According to his confession, he had been watching your family for over a year before he took Emma. He knew your work schedule, Emma's school routine, everything. Emma had been listening to this conversation with the stoic expression of a child who had learned to process terrible information. Mommy, she said quietly, can we go home now? Rebecca looked around the hospital room, then at the detectives and doctors who had helped bring her daughter back to her. Yes, baby, we can go home. But even as she said it, Rebecca knew that home would never be the same. They would have to rebuild their lives, their relationship, their sense of safety. Emma had survived 5 years of captivity, but the real challenge was just beginning. As they prepared to leave the hospital, Emma slipped her hand into her mother's. Mommy, I have something to tell you. What is it, sweetheart? I never stopped believing you would find me. Even when Uncle David said you were dead, even when I was scared and lonely, I knew you were out there looking for me. Emma squeezed her mother's hand. I knew, because that's what mommies do. They never give up on their babies. Rebecca knelt down to Emma's level and looked into her daughter's eyes. That's right, baby. Mommies never give up. And I will never, ever let anyone take you away from me again. The drive back to Millbrook, Pennsylvania felt like traveling through time. Emma sat in the passenger seat of Detective Morrison's car, her face pressed against the window, watching the landscape change from unfamiliar Wisconsin farmland to the rolling hills of home. It looks smaller than I remember, Emma said softly, as they passed the Welcome to Millbrook sign. Rebecca, who was sitting in the back seat, leaned forward. What looks smaller? Everything. The houses, the streets, even the trees. Emma turned to look at her mother. I guess I got bigger. It was such a simple observation, but it hit Rebecca like a physical blow. Emma had grown up during those 5 missing years. She had gone from a 7-year-old child to a 12-year-old girl, and Rebecca had missed every moment of it. As they drove down Main Street, Rebecca noticed people stopping on the sidewalks to stare at their car. Word had already spread through the small town that Emma Martinez was alive and coming home. By the time they reached Maple Street, there were neighbors gathered on their front lawns, some crying, some applauding, all of them staring in amazement at the miracle unfolding before their eyes. There's Mrs. Patterson, Emma said, pointing to the elderly woman who had been Rebecca's neighbor for years. She looks older too. Mrs. Patterson was indeed older, her hair now completely white, her face more lined with wrinkles, but her smile was exactly the same as she waved enthusiastically at the car. When they pulled into Rebecca's driveway, Emma stared at the small blue house that had been her home for the first 7 years of her life. My swing set is gone, she observed. Rebecca's heart clenched. She had donated the swing set to charity 3 years ago, unable to bear looking at it every day. I'm sorry, baby. I can get you a new one. It's okay, Emma said, but there was sadness in her voice. I'm probably too big for swings now anyway. Detective Morrison helped carry Emma's few belongings, just a small bag of clothes that the hospital had provided, into the house. Emma stood in the living room, looking around with the expression of someone visiting a museum of their own childhood. My pictures are still here, she said, walking over to the mantelpiece where Rebecca had kept dozens of photos of Emma at various ages. "I never took them down," Rebecca said. "I couldn't." Emma picked up a photo of herself at age 6, missing her 2 front teeth and grinning at the camera. "I remember this. You took it on my birthday right before we went to Chuck E. Cheese. You remember that?" "I remember everything, Mommy. Every birthday, every Christmas, every bedtime story. I made myself remember so I wouldn't forget who I was." Detective Morrison cleared his throat gently. "I'm going to leave you two alone now. But Rebecca, the FBI is going to want to interview Emma more extensively in the next few days. And there will probably be media attention." Rebecca nodded, though her focus was entirely on Emma, who was now examining the bookshelf where her favorite childhood stories were still displayed. "My butterfly book," Emma exclaimed, pulling out a worn copy of The Very Hungry Caterpillar. "I was reading this the day before Uncle David took me." Rebecca sat down on the couch and patted the cushion beside her. "Come here, baby. We need to talk about some things." Emma sat down, still clutching the children's book. "What kind of things?" "Well, there are going to be a lot of people who want to talk to you about what happened. Police officers, doctors, maybe even reporters, and I want you to know that you don't have to talk to anyone you don't want to talk to." Emma nodded solemnly. "Uncle David always said that if I talked to the wrong people, something bad would happen. But he was lying about everything else, so I guess he was lying about that too. He was definitely lying about that. The people who want to talk to you are trying to help. They want to make sure Uncle David can never hurt another child." Emma was quiet for a moment, turning the pages of her butterfly book. "Mommy, can I ask you something?" "Anything, sweetheart." "Did you really think I was dead? Did you have a funeral? For me?" Rebecca's throat tightened. This was the conversation she had been dreading. "Yes, baby. We did. The police found some bones in the woods, and we all thought they belonged to you. But you never really believed it, did you? That's why you recognized me on TV so fast." Rebecca was amazed by her daughter's perceptiveness. "You're right. Deep down, I never really believed you were gone. I visited your grave every week, but it never felt real to me." "Where is the grave?" "In Millbrook Cemetery, next to your grandmother." Emma considered this. "Can we go see it? I want to see what it looks like." Rebecca wasn't sure if that was a good idea, but she had learned not to underestimate her daughter's emotional intelligence. "If you want to, we can go tomorrow." As evening approached, Rebecca realized she had no idea what Emma's routine had been for the past 5 years. "Are you hungry, baby? What do you like to eat now?" Uncle David mostly made sandwiches and soup, sometimes pasta. Emma paused. "But I always remembered your pancakes. I used to dream about them." Rebecca's eyes filled with tears. "I can make pancakes for dinner if you want." "Really? For dinner? Tonight we can have pancakes for every meal if you want." As Rebecca prepared the pancakes, Emma explored the house, reacquainting herself with her childhood home. She spent a long time in her old bedroom, which Rebecca had kept exactly as it was the day Emma disappeared. "You didn't change anything," Emma said when Rebecca came to check on her. "I couldn't. I kept hoping you'd come home and want everything to be the same." Emma sat on her old bed, which was now too small for her 12-year-old frame. "I'm different now, Mommy. I'm not the same little girl who left this room." Rebecca sat beside her daughter. "I know, sweetheart. And that's okay. We'll figure out who you are now together. What if I can't be normal again? What if I'm too weird now, after living with Uncle David for so long?" "Emma, look at me." Rebecca took her daughter's hands. "You survived 5 years with a very bad man, and you never forgot who you were. You never stopped believing I would find you. That doesn't make you weird. That makes you the strongest, bravest person I know." Emma leaned against her mother's shoulder. "I missed you so much, Mommy. Every single day. I missed you too, baby, more than you'll ever know." As they sat together in Emma's childhood bedroom, Rebecca realized that this was just the first of many conversations they would need to have. There would be therapy, legal proceedings, and the long process of helping Emma readjust to normal life. But for now, in this moment, it was enough that they were together. Emma was alive, she was home, and she was still, fundamentally, Rebecca's little girl. "Mommy," Emma said sleepily. "Yes, baby? Can you tell me a bedtime story? Like you used to?" Rebecca smiled through her tears. "Once upon a time, there was a little girl who loved butterflies." The courtroom was packed on the morning of David Hartwell's sentencing. Rebecca sat in the front row, holding Emma's hand tightly as they faced the man who had stolen 5 years of their lives. Emma had grown so much in the 6 months since her rescue. She was taller, her voice was changing, and she was slowly learning to trust the world again. David Hartwell looked nothing like the monster Rebecca had imagined. He was a thin, balding man in his 50s, who kept his eyes downcast throughout the proceedings. His lawyer had tried to argue for leniency, claiming mental illness and a troubled childhood, but the evidence was overwhelming. "Mr. Hartwell," Judge Patricia Morrison said, her voice stern and unwavering, "you have been found guilty of kidnapping, child endangerment, and multiple counts of fraud related to your false identity. The court has reviewed the psychological evaluations, the victim impact statements, and the evidence presented during this trial." Rebecca squeezed Emma's hand as the judge continued. Emma had been brave enough to testify via closed-circuit television, telling the court about her years in captivity. She described how Hartwell had told her that her mother was dead, how he had moved her from state to state, always keeping her isolated from other children. "For 5 years, you robbed a mother of her child and a child of her childhood," Judge Morrison continued. "You created elaborate lies to maintain your deception, including forged death certificates and false police reports. Your actions caused immeasurable pain to an entire community." The judge paused, looking directly at Hartwell. "However, the court also acknowledges that you did not physically harm the victim and that you provided for her basic needs during her captivity. This does not excuse your crimes, but it will be considered in sentencing." Rebecca felt her jaw clench. The fact that Hartwell hadn't physically abused Emma was something to be grateful for, but it didn't erase the psychological damage he had caused. Emma still woke up screaming some nights, still flinched when strangers approached her, still asked if Rebecca was really her mother. "David Hartwell, I hereby sentence you to 25 years in federal prison without the possibility of parole. For 15 years, Judge Morrison announced. "You will also be required to pay restitution to the Mitchell family for therapy costs and lost wages." A collective sigh of relief filled the courtroom. Rebecca felt tears streaming down her face as she pulled Emma into a tight hug. It wasn't enough. No sentence could give them back those lost years. But it was justice. As they left the courthouse, reporters swarmed around them. Rebecca had learned to navigate the media attention over the past months, always protecting Emma's privacy while sharing enough of their story to help other families. "Mrs. Mitchell, how do you feel about the sentence?" a reporter called out. Rebecca paused on the courthouse steps, Emma safely tucked behind her. "I feel like we can finally start to heal," she said simply. "My daughter is home, she's safe, and the man who took her can never hurt another family. That's what matters." The healing process was slower and more complicated than Rebecca had ever imagined. Emma, now 12 years old, struggled with simple things that other children took for granted. She had never been to a movie theater, never been to a birthday party, never learned to ride a bike. Her education had been limited to whatever Hartwell had taught her, which meant she was years behind her peers in some subjects while surprisingly advanced in others. Dr. Sarah Chen, Emma's therapist, explained that this was normal for children who had experienced prolonged captivity. Emma's brain developed differently during those crucial years, she told Rebecca during one of their weekly sessions. She learned to survive in an abnormal situation, which means she has some remarkable coping skills, but she also missed out on normal social and emotional development. Rebecca watched through the one-way mirror as Emma played with dolls in Dr. Chen's office. Even her play was different from other children's, more cautious, more controlled. She would carefully arrange the dolls in perfect rows, then create elaborate scenarios where they were lost and found again. "She's processing her trauma through play," Dr. Chen explained. This is actually a very healthy sign. She's working through her feelings about being lost and found. At home, Rebecca tried to create as normal an environment as possible while respecting Emma's need for security and routine. They had moved to a new house in a different part of town, somewhere with no memories of the old life where Emma could start fresh. The house had a big backyard where Emma could play safely, and Rebecca had installed security cameras and motion sensors to help Emma feel protected. Emma's favorite spot was the garden, where Rebecca had planted a butterfly garden just like the one Emma had dreamed about in second grade. They would sit together in the evenings, watching the monarchs and swallowtails dance among the flowers. "Do you remember when you wanted to do that science project about butterflies?" Rebecca asked one evening as they watched a caterpillar spinning its cocoon. Emma nodded, her eyes following the butterfly's flight. "Mrs. Henderson said they completely change into something beautiful," she said softly. "I used to think about that a lot when I was away. I pretended I was in a cocoon waiting to become something beautiful again." Rebecca's heart broke and soared at the same time. Her daughter's resilience was extraordinary, but the fact that she had needed such resilience at such a young age was heartbreaking. "You were always beautiful, baby," Rebecca whispered, pulling Emma close. "Even when you were scared, even when you were far away, you were always my beautiful butterfly." School was another challenge. Emma was academically ready for 7th grade, in some subjects but emotionally more like a 9-year-old. The principal, Mrs. Rodriguez, worked with Rebecca to create a special program that would allow Emma to learn at her own pace while gradually integrating with other students. "She's incredibly bright," Mrs. Rodriguez told Rebecca after Emma's first week. "Her reading comprehension is off the charts, and her mathematical reasoning is remarkable, but she's very anxious in social situations." Rebecca wasn't surprised. Emma had spent 5 years with only one adult for company. The idea of being around dozens of children her own age was overwhelming. They started slowly. Emma attended regular classes for subjects she excelled in like math and science, but worked with a tutor for social studies and English, subjects that required more cultural knowledge she had missed. During lunch and recess, she spent time with the school counselor, gradually learning how to interact with her peers. The breakthrough came during a science class about metamorphosis. Emma's teacher, Mr. Peterson, was explaining how butterflies transform when Emma suddenly raised her hand. "I know about that," she said quietly. "Sometimes you have to be in a dark place for a long time before you can become who you're supposed to be." The classroom fell silent. Mr. Peterson, who knew Emma's story, nodded thoughtfully. "That's a very wise observation, Emma. Can you tell us more about what you mean?" Emma looked around at her classmates, many of whom were hearing her speak for the first time. "Well," she said, gaining confidence, "the caterpillar doesn't know it's going to become a butterfly. It just knows it has to keep going even when everything is dark and scary. And then one day it breaks out and discovers it can fly." 2 years after Emma's rescue, Rebecca received a phone call that would change their lives once again. Detective Chen was on the line, his voice carrying a mixture of excitement and apprehension. "Rebecca, we need to talk," he said. "We've discovered something about David Hartwell that you need to know." They met at the police station the next morning. Emma was at school, finally thriving in 8th grade, and even making friends. Rebecca had been careful not to burden her daughter with the ongoing investigation, but she knew this conversation might change that. "We've been investigating Hartwell's background more thoroughly," Detective Chen began, spreading files across the conference table. "We found evidence that Emma wasn't his first victim." Rebecca's blood ran cold. "What do you mean?" "We found records going back 15 years. Hartwell has been moving around the country, targeting single mothers with young daughters. We've identified at least 3 other cases where children disappeared under similar circumstances." The detective showed Rebecca photographs of 3 other little girls. Maria Santos from Texas disappeared in 2008. Ashley Thompson from Oregon disappeared in 2011. And Lily Chang from Florida disappeared in 2014. "Are they—" Rebecca couldn't finish the question. "We don't know yet," Detective Chen said gently. but we have teams investigating each case. The good news is that if Hartwell followed the same pattern with them as he did with Emma, there's a chance they're still alive. Rebecca stared at the photographs, seeing the same innocent smiles, the same trusting eyes that Emma had once had. Somewhere out there, 3 other mothers might be living the nightmare that Rebecca had endured for 5 years. "What can I do to help?" she asked without hesitation. "We'd like you and Emma to help us understand Hartwell's methods better. Emma might remember things about other children, other places they lived, and we'd like you to consider reaching out to the other families if we find them." That evening, Rebecca sat Emma down for one of the hardest conversations of their new life together. She explained about the other missing children, about how Emma's rescue might be the key to saving other families. Emma listened quietly, her face serious beyond her 14 years. When Rebecca finished, Emma was quiet for a long moment. "I remember voices sometimes," Emma said finally. "When we lived in the house with the blue shutters, I heard crying at night. He said it was the neighbor's cat, but it sounded like a little girl." Rebecca's heart raced. "Do you remember anything else about that house?" "It was near a train track. I could hear the trains every morning at 7:15, and there was a water tower with a bird painted on it." Emma paused, her brow furrowed in concentration. "I think there was another girl there before me. I found a hair ribbon under the floorboard, in my room. It was pink with little flowers on it." Detective Chen was called immediately. Within hours, they had identified the house Emma described, a rental property in Kansas that Hartwell had occupied from 2011 to 2013. The timeline matched perfectly with Ashley Thompson's disappearance. The next few weeks were a whirlwind of activity. Emma worked with a police artist to create detailed drawings of the houses she remembered, the routes they had traveled, and any other children she might have seen or heard. Her memory was remarkably detailed, a survival skill she had developed during her captivity. The breakthrough came when police raided a storage unit that Hartwell had rented under a false name. Inside, they found personal belongings from all 4 girls, including Ashley Thompson's pink hair ribbon that Emma had described. More importantly, they found Hartwell's detailed journals, documenting his movements and methods over 15 years. The journals revealed the locations where he had kept each child, and more crucially, they suggested that at least 2 of the other girls might still be alive. Rebecca found herself at the center of a massive investigation that spanned multiple states. She took leave from her job to work full-time with law enforcement, using her experience and Emma's memories to help track down the other victims. The media attention was intense, but this time Rebecca embraced it. She appeared on national television, pleading with the public to come forward with any information about the missing girls. "5 years ago, I thought my daughter was dead," she said during an interview on Good Morning America. "But she was alive, waiting for someone to find her. Right now, there are other mothers out there who think their daughters are gone forever. But they might not be. They might be waiting for us to bring them home." The response was overwhelming. Tips poured in from across the country, and law enforcement agencies coordinated the largest missing children investigation in recent history. Emma, now a confident teenager, insisted on being part of the effort. "I survived because I never stopped believing that you would find me," she told Rebecca. "Maybe I can help other kids believe that too." The call came at 2:17 a.m. on a cold November morning. Rebecca jolted awake to the sound of her phone buzzing insistently on the nightstand. Detective Chen's name flashed on the screen, and Rebecca's heart immediately began racing. Calls at this hour could only mean one thing. They had found something. "Rebecca, we found her." Detective Chen's voice was thick with emotion. "We found Ashley Thompson. She's alive." Rebecca sat up in bed, her hands shaking as she gripped the phone. "Where? Is she okay?" "She's in a hospital in Denver. Local police found her in a house about 40 miles outside the city. She's malnourished and scared, but she's alive. She's been asking for her mother." Tears streamed down Rebecca's face as she processed the news. Ashley Thompson had been missing for 12 years. She was now 23 years old. No longer the 11-year-old girl who had disappeared from a playground in Oregon. "What about the others?" Rebecca asked, though she was almost afraid to hear the answer. Detective Chen's pause told her everything she needed to know. We're still searching. But Rebecca Ashley remembers Emma. She remembers the house with the blue shutters. Emma's testimony is what led us to her. Within hours, Rebecca and Emma were on a plane to Denver. Ashley's mother, Patricia Thompson, had flown in from Oregon, and the reunion at the hospital was both heartbreaking and miraculous. Ashley was thin and pale, her eyes holding the same haunted look that Emma's had carried for months after her rescue. But when Ashley saw Emma walk into her hospital room, something shifted in her expression. Recognition flickered across her face, followed by something that looked almost like relief. "You're the little girl," Ashley whispered, her voice hoarse, from years of limited use. "You're the one who left the drawings under the floorboard." Emma nodded, tears in her eyes. "I found your ribbon. I kept it safe." The two survivors embraced, and Rebecca watched in amazement as years of trauma seemed to lift slightly from both girls' shoulders. They had found each other again, and in that finding, they had found proof that survival was possible. Over the next few days, Ashley slowly began to share her story. Like Emma, she had been told that her family was dead, that no one was looking for her. Hartwell had moved her frequently, keeping her isolated and dependent on him for everything. But unlike Emma, Ashley had been older when she was taken, and she had never fully believed Hartwell's lies. "I always knew my mom was out there," Ashley told Rebecca during one of their conversations. "I could feel it, like there was this invisible string connecting us, and no matter how far he took me, it never broke." Patricia Thompson was a broken woman who had spent 12 years believing her daughter was dead. She had divorced Ashley's father, unable to cope with the constant reminder of their loss. She had moved 3 times, changed jobs twice, and had been in therapy for over a decade. "I never stopped looking," Patricia whispered to Rebecca as they watched their daughters talk quietly in Ashley's hospital room. "Even when the police said she was probably dead, even when everyone told me to move on, I never stopped believing she was out there." The discovery of Ashley alive renewed hope for the families of Maria Santos and Lily Chang. The FBI expanded their search, using Ashley's memories combined with Emma's to create a more complete picture of Hartwell's movements and methods. Ashley remembered being in a house near the Mexican border, where she had heard Spanish being spoken by a young girl in another room. The timeline matched Maria Santos's disappearance, and the location narrowed the search to a specific region of Texas. "She was so little," Ashley told investigators, her voice breaking. "I could hear her crying at night, calling for her mama. I tried to comfort her by singing lullabies through the wall, but I don't know if she could hear me." The search for Maria led to a small town called Esperanza, just 30 miles from the Mexican border. Local police had been alerted to watch for any properties that matched Hartwell's pattern. Isolated houses with basements or hidden rooms, always rented under false names. The breakthrough came when a local real estate agent remembered renting a house to a man matching Hartwell's description in 2009. The house had been abandoned for years, but when police searched it, they found evidence that children had been kept there. Scratches on the walls that looked like height measurements, children's drawings hidden behind loose boards, and most heartbreakingly, a small rosary that Maria's mother later identified as belonging to her daughter. But Maria herself was nowhere to be found. The trail had gone cold again, leading investigators to believe that Hartwell had moved her to yet another location before his arrest. Emma insisted on joining the search efforts, despite Rebecca's concerns about exposing her to more trauma. "I have to help," Emma said with a determination that reminded Rebecca of herself. "I'm the only one who really knows how his mind worked. I might remember something that could save her." Working with FBI profilers, Emma helped create a detailed map of all the places Hartwell had taken her. She remembered specific details that only a child would notice. The sound of church bells that rang every hour, the smell of a nearby paper mill, the way the light came through a particular window. He always chose places where no one would think to look, Emma explained to the task force. But he also needed to feel safe, so he picked places where he could watch the roads, where he could see anyone coming from far away. Using Emma's insights, investigators identified a pattern in Hartwell's location choices. He preferred rural areas with multiple escape routes, always within driving distance of major highways but far enough from main roads to avoid casual discovery. The search for Maria Santos became a race against time. If she was still alive, she had been in captivity for 15 years, longer than any of the other victims. The psychological damage would be severe, and her chances of survival decreased with each passing day. The phone call that changed everything came from an unexpected source. Rosa Martinez, a social worker in a small town called Milagro, New Mexico, had been following the news coverage of the missing children case. Something about the description of Maria Santos had been nagging at her for weeks. "I think I might know where she is," Rosa told Detective Chen during their phone conversation. "There's a young woman here who's been living with an elderly couple for about 10 years. They claim she's their granddaughter, but something has never felt right about the situation." Rosa explained that the woman, who went by the name Carmen, had appeared in Milagro around 2014 with severe developmental disabilities and no memory of her past. The couple who took her in, the Hernandezes, claimed that Carmen was their son's daughter, that her parents had died in a car accident and she had suffered brain damage. "But Carmen doesn't look anything like the Hernandezes," Rosa continued. "And she has these episodes where she speaks about things that don't match their story. She talks about a man who kept her in dark rooms, about missing her real mama." Detective Chen felt his pulse quicken. The timeline matched perfectly. If Hartwell had abandoned Maria in 2014, it would have been right around the time he took Emma. Perhaps he had grown tired of caring for an older child, or maybe Maria had become too difficult to control. Within 24 hours, a team of investigators was on their way to Milagro. Rebecca and Emma insisted on coming along, despite the potential dangers of the situation. If this woman was indeed Maria Santos, she would need familiar faces, people who understood what she had been through. The town of Milagro was exactly the kind of place Hartwell would have chosen. Small, isolated, where strangers were noticed but not necessarily questioned if they had a plausible story. The Hernandez house sat at the end of a dirt road, surrounded by desert scrub and mountains. When police knocked on the door, an elderly man answered with obvious nervousness. "We haven't done anything wrong," he said immediately, which only increased the investigators' suspicions. "We're here about Carmen," Detective Chen explained gently. "We need to speak with her about a case we're investigating." The man, who identified himself as Eduardo Hernandez, reluctantly led them into the house. In the living room, sitting in a chair by the window, was a young woman who looked to be in her mid-20s. She was thin and pale, with long dark hair and eyes that seemed much older than her years. But when Rebecca looked at her face, she gasped. Even after 15 years, even with the changes that trauma and time had wrought, she could see the little girl from the missing person posters. "Maria?" Rebecca said softly. The young woman's head snapped up, her eyes wide with something that looked like recognition mixed with fear. "How do you know that name?" she whispered. "No one has called me that in so long." Emma stepped forward slowly, her hands visible and non-threatening. "My name is Emma. I was taken by the same man who took you. Do you remember the house with the blue shutters? Do you remember hearing someone singing lullabies through the wall?" Maria's eyes filled with tears as memories seemed to flood back. "The singing girl," she whispered. "You were so little. I tried to help you not be scared." The reunion between Maria and her mother, Isabella Santos, was unlike anything Rebecca had ever witnessed. Isabella had never given up hope, had never stopped searching, had never stopped believing that her daughter was alive somewhere. She had learned English, had moved to different states following leads, had spent every penny she had on private investigators. When Isabella walked into that hospital room in Albuquerque where Maria was being evaluated, 15 years of grief and hope collided in a moment that left everyone in tears. "Mija," Isabella whispered, using the pet name she had called Maria as a child. "Mi niña, I never stopped looking for you." Maria's recovery was complicated by the years of psychological manipulation and the trauma of believing she was mentally disabled. The Hernandezes, it turned out, were not malicious. They genuinely believed they were caring for a damaged young woman who had nowhere else to go. They had no idea she was a kidnapping victim. Hartwell was clever, Dr. Martinez, the psychiatrist treating Maria, explained to Rebecca. He convinced her that she was brain damaged, that her memories of her real family were delusions. When he abandoned her, she was so confused and traumatized that she couldn't distinguish between reality and the lies he had told her. But with therapy and the support of other survivors, Maria began to reclaim her identity. She remembered her real name, her mother's face, the house where she had grown up. She remembered being 11 years old and playing in the park when a nice man offered to help her find her lost puppy. The search for Lily Chang, the youngest of Hartwell's victims, continued with renewed urgency. Lily had been only 5 when she disappeared in 2014, which meant she was now 15, the same age Emma had been when she was found. Emma, Ashley, and Maria worked together with investigators, pooling their memories to create the most complete picture possible of Hartwell's methods and locations. They remembered a house near water, the sound of boats, the smell of salt air. "He took me there last," Maria remembered during one of their sessions. "There was a little girl there, so small and scared. She had black hair and she spoke a different language sometimes. I tried to take care of her, but then the man said we had to leave, and he only took me." The description matched Lily Chang perfectly. She had been bilingual, speaking both English and Mandarin with her parents. If Maria's memory was correct, Lily might have been left behind when Hartwell moved Maria to New Mexico. The search focused on coastal areas where Hartwell had been known to operate. Using satellite imagery and property records, investigators identified dozens of potential locations: abandoned houses, rental properties, anywhere a man could hide a child for years without detection. The final breakthrough came from an unexpected source: Hartwell himself. After months of refusing to cooperate with investigators, he suddenly requested a meeting with Rebecca and the other mothers. His lawyer explained that Hartwell claimed he wanted to make amends before his appeal hearing. Rebecca was reluctant to face the man who had destroyed so many lives, but the possibility of finding Lily Chang alive outweighed her personal feelings. She, Isabella Santos, and Patricia Thompson traveled to the federal prison where Hartwell was being held. The man they met bore little resemblance to the confident predator who had terrorized their families. Prison had aged him dramatically, and he seemed smaller, more fragile than Rebecca had expected. But his eyes still held the same calculating intelligence that had allowed him to evade capture for so many years. "I know you hate me," Hartwell said without preamble, "and you have every right to. But I need you to know that I never meant for any of this to happen the way it did." Rebecca felt her anger rising, but she forced herself to remain calm. "Where is Lily Chang?" she asked directly. Hartwell's face crumpled, and for the first time, he looked genuinely remorseful. "I don't know," he whispered. "I left her with someone I thought would take care of her. I was getting too old, too tired to keep moving around. I thought she would be better off." "Who?" Isabella Santos demanded. "Who did you leave her with?" "A woman named Grace Chen. She ran a boarding house near the coast in Northern California. She said she would take care of Lily, that she would give her a good home. I gave her money, told her that Lily's parents were dead." Detective Chen, who had been listening from the corner of the room, immediately began making phone calls. Within hours, they had located Grace Chen's boarding house in a small town called Mendocino, about 3 hours north of San Francisco. The race to Mendocino felt like the longest journey of Rebecca's life. She, Emma, and the other families had come too far to lose hope now. Lily Chang would be 15 years old enough to remember her real family if she had been allowed to keep those memories. Grace Chen turned out to be a kind but naive woman in her 70s, who had genuinely believed she was helping an orphaned child. When police arrived at her boarding house, she was confused and frightened, insisting that the girl she knew as Lily was her great-niece from China. "She came to me when she was so small and scared," Grace explained through tears. "The man said her parents died in an accident, that she needed a safe place to live. I've been taking care of her for 10 years. She's like my own granddaughter." Lily Chang was in her room, doing homework at a small desk by the window. When Rebecca first saw her, she was struck by how normal the teenager looked. Healthy, well-dressed, with the kind of confidence that came from being loved and cared for. But when Detective Chen gently explained who they were and why they had come, Lily's face went through a series of emotions: confusion, disbelief, and then a dawning recognition that seemed to unlock memories she had buried deep inside. "I remember," she whispered, her voice barely audible. "I remember my mama and baba. I remember our house with the red door. I remember speaking Chinese with my grandmother." The reunion between Lily and her parents, David and Mei Chang, was bittersweet. They had divorced 3 years after Lily's disappearance, unable to cope with the loss and the constant uncertainty. But seeing their daughter alive brought them together in a way that nothing else could have. Lily's recovery was different from the others. Grace Chen had genuinely loved her and had provided a stable, nurturing environment. Lily had attended school, made friends, and lived a relatively normal life. But she had also lost 10 years with her real family, and the knowledge that her entire identity had been built on a lie was devastating. "I don't know who I am anymore," Lily confided to Emma during one of their conversations. "Am I Lily Chang? Or am I the girl Grace raised? How do I choose between two families who both love me?" Emma, now 17 and wise beyond her years, took Lily's hand. "You're both," she said simply. "You're Lily Chang, the daughter your parents never stopped loving, but you're also the girl who Grace cared for and protected. You don't have to choose. You can honor both parts of your story." The legal proceedings that followed were complex. Grace Chen was not charged with any crime, as she had genuinely believed she was caring for an orphaned child. Instead, she became part of Lily's extended support system, helping her navigate the transition back to her biological family. Hartwell's final sentencing took place on a sunny day in May, exactly 6 years after Emma's rescue. All 4 families were present in the courtroom, along with their daughters. Emma, now a confident high school senior planning to study psychology in college. Ashley, who had become an advocate for missing children. Maria, who was slowly rebuilding her life with the support of her mother and community. And Lily, who was learning to balance her 2 identities while excelling in school. Judge Morrison looked at Hartwell with undisguised contempt as she delivered the final sentence. "Mr. Hartwell, your crimes have caused immeasurable pain to these families and to these brave young women. However, the court also recognizes that your cooperation in locating the final victim has allowed for healing that might not otherwise have been possible." She paused, looking at the families in the gallery. "The sentence of 25 years stands, but I want to address the real heroes in this courtroom. To the mothers who never gave up hope, to the survivors who found the courage to help others, and to the community that rallied around these families. You have shown that love is stronger than evil, that hope is more powerful than despair." As they left the courthouse for the final time, Rebecca walked arm in arm with Emma, surrounded by the extended family they had created through shared trauma and healing. The other mothers and daughters had become more than friends. They were sisters, bound together by an experience that no one else could truly understand. "Do you think we'll all stay in touch?" Emma asked as they watched Lily hug Grace Chen goodbye. Rebecca smiled, thinking about the group chat they had started, the monthly video calls, the way they had all promised to be there for each other's milestones. "I think we're stuck with each other for life," she said, "and I wouldn't have it any other way." That evening, as Rebecca and Emma sat in their butterfly garden watching the sunset, Emma turned to her mother with a question that had been weighing on her mind. "Mom, do you think everything happens for a reason?" Rebecca considered the question carefully. She thought about the 5 years of hell they had endured, the other families who had suffered, the children who had lost their innocence far too young. She thought about the strength they had all discovered, the bonds they had formed, the other children they had helped save. "I don't think bad things happen for a reason," she said finally, "but I think we can choose to find meaning in how we respond to them. You could have let what happened to you make you bitter and afraid. Instead, you chose to use your experience to help others. That's not because of what happened to you. That's because of who you are." Emma nodded, watching a butterfly land on the flowers they had planted together. I'm glad I could help bring them home, she said softly. Me too, baby, Rebecca whispered, pulling her daughter close. Me too. As the stars began to appear in the darkening sky, Rebecca reflected on the journey that had brought them to this moment. It had been 6 years since that terrible morning. When Emma disappeared, 6 years of pain and hope and healing. They had lost so much, but they had also found something precious. The unbreakable bond between a mother and daughter, and the power of love to overcome even the darkest circumstances. The butterfly garden around them was in full bloom, a living testament to the transformation that was possible even after the darkest times. Like the butterflies Emma had once dreamed of studying, they had all emerged from their cocoons changed, but beautiful, ready to spread their wings and fly. Note, this story is entirely fictional. Any resemblance to real people, places, or events is purely coincidental.